Hello, people. I have with me here today Kenneth Solberg Haustad, who is going to
Hi,
be giving a course on Milton's Paradise Lost here at sPhil. So, welcome, Kenneth.
thank you.
We're just going to talk a little bit about what you're cooking, what you're going to be putting together, and maybe think a little bit about this epic poem that is still probably one of the greatest pieces of literature ever put together. Um, so everybody knows Paradise Lost, probably from the most famous character from there, which is Milton's Satan.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
Why did they make the ultimate villain so relatable?
Well, that's a very interesting entry point to Paradise Lost. Um, because in many ways, what Paradise Lost is maybe the most ambitious piece of fan fiction ever made. Some people have characterized it like that because it is Milton's retelling of the very familiar story of the fall from Eden. And in the Bible, Satan is, I think it's safe to say, a rather one-dimensional character.
Hmm.
But in Paradise Lost, he becomes, in a sense, more real because we could. Okay, he's evil, but he's also insecure. He can feel shame. It's a very complicated persona that Milton puts together in Paradise Lost. And he and Satan speaks in a particular way, and these similes and very kind of complex, almost obfuscating language,
Hmm.
while God is portrayed in a much more straightforward fashion. In a sense, Milton's view of what the pure, the true, and so on. And this, of course, has given rise to this idea that he made Satan a hero almost, like a
Yes.
hero villain.
Hmm. So the question then is, why did he do this? To make some good fan fiction, or was there a deeper purpose to it?
Well, good. It's a good question. I mean, we're of course moving into literature territory now, very heavily. Um, and I think there are many opinions on why that is. But in a sense, could Satan be such an alluring, tempting figure in a sense if he really was so one-dimensional as as he tends to be portrayed?
Hmm.
Because Satan is of course the instigator of the greatest tragedy of all
Yeah.
by tempting Eve to eat the apple. But there's also, in a sense, um, I think it also has something to do with how Milton makes things more tangible in a sense in his poem. That also comes from his so-called monism, in the sense his view that spirit and matter, it's not a duality or anything like that. It's a kind of a continuum. So
Hmm.
the angels, for example, have many human characteristics, but they're not human. They're in a sense higher than humans.
Right.
And Satan was, of course, himself an angel originally as Lucifer. And I think that's also in the sense that when you focus so much on a character, there has to, I think that tangibility, that almost uh, semi-humanness becomes, I think, a natural part of that character. And, but also, Milton based a lot of the stuff that he does in Paradise Lost on earlier examples that he forms and shift almost molds into his own. And this is, for example, the way we can see Satan almost traveling and meeting these obstacles. A very famous scene where he is confronted by his offspring,
Mm.
death, which of course we will touch upon
Mm.
in the chorus. That's almost evoking from The Fairy Queen by Spenser. But what
Right.
happens with the Red Cross Knight in
Uh-huh.
the same kind of trials, only in a very, it's almost like a perverted form of that, with but also mirroring the heroes, for example, in many of these old tales, like the Red Cross Knight, the monsters they encounter, they very often have the most twisted, also sexually charged um, kind of imagery around them. And this is also the case with, with sin springing from Satan's head, and then Satan ending up in an unholy union with sin, thus producing death,
Okay.
and so on.
That reminds me of Athena coming out of Zeus's head.
That's definitely intentional.
Yeah. There's a lot of classical references and roots in Milton, right? So he is, as you say, it's a fan fiction of biblical narrative and themes, but he also weaves in all the classical tradition and foundation as well. So it's almost like it's a yeah work of Renaissance, even though it's later after that, right?
Yes, we might even say that. Yeah, he throughout as he tells the tale, he weaves everything into we might call it a tapestry of his thinking,
Mm.
learning in theology, philosophy, politics, even astronomy, and so on. Famously, he alludes to the Tuscan artist in the poem, the Galileo,
Mm.
which he seems to actually have met in person on his travels,
Okay.
because he was acquainted with his bastard son. I've
Okay.
forgotten his name. Yeah.
Um, so in the poem, there is freedom, rebellion, authoritarianism. So it's a lot like political themes weaved into it as well. And
Yeah, sure, definitely.
do we see that like can we separate the masterpiece from the politics of its creator?
Uh, that's that's a rather controversial question. At least in history of studying literature. Um, I think that, I mean, Milton would probably disagree, but I think that you can you can make. I mean, as long as a text is published and it's there, um, we tend to think now that it takes on its own life, and you could choose to ignore any aspect of his background and his surroundings. But then what you're really getting is, in a sense, your own meeting with the text, and I think that has value as well. But Paradise Lost is very. It's of course a text that has been famous for being very difficult to read, very difficult to understand, and and of course one of the reasons that it is so hard is that it comes out of a very particular context, very particular literary ideals,
Hmm.
with you could say learned people, as John Milton was, working with sentences that seem to us almost ridiculously long,
Yeah.
and and also you could say that. in order to engage with Paradise Lost and what's happening with the poem, at least seen from a 17th century view, um, there was not a lot of people who had, in a sense, the know-how and the skill set to do that,
Mm.
uh, and uh, and that's of course Milton belonged, of course, to a class of learned people who were very far removed from the average person in England. And and you could say that they worked with these traditions in these classical models, but particularly also these very long constructions of text, where you really have to be keeping you have to keep track of things that are quite far away from the exact spot that you're actually reading in the text. Um, and This is also why a lot of people, when they engage with Milton, it's so far from the, our ideals of writing and legibility of writing, that it tends the poem can collapse into a seemingly endless stream of lines that they may sound good and all that, but it's very hard to grasp,
Mm.
even to the point where you can't even deduce what the basic action is,
Yeah.
which was a problem really from the day it was published,
Yeah.
because there were two problems with Paradise Lost. You could say, which also brings us to the heart of the course and the approach I'm taking. But the first problem was, we touched upon it, is the narrative structure, because when you're confronted with these long and complex sentence structures, and also it's non-linear order of events, because Milton doesn't tell the tale in chronological order,
Mm.
for example. Um, it was really hard even for people in his own time to get a grasp of even the basic chain of events. What's happening? Who is really speaking? I'm kind of lost
Yeah.
already. Um, and But the second problem was that when you do epic poetry, people expected you to have end rhymes. So you're supposed to rhyme in the end.
Yeah.
Um, and so a lot of contemporary readers, they were very unsure. How do we approach this thing? Is it verse? Is it prose? Is it kind of a mix, like a poetic prose?
Hmm.
So there was clearly so much confusion going on that so many people complained to Milton's publisher slash printer. There was no difference back then. And so he actually he adds a kind of a message which he calls the printer to the reader in some of later the later
Additions?
yes, we can call them that, later versions of the first edition, because the funny thing about the first edition was that it didn't, to begin with, it didn't sell all that many copies. So what the printers, Simmons, did was that the first batch, he had the title page 1667, but he took the same things that were printed in 1667, and he just kept publishing it later, just with new title pages until he ran out.
Hmm.
So it's one of those later ones
Okay.
that he adds the printer to the reader. But the interesting thing about that is he tells us that in the beginning, there was no intention to explain before each book in Paradise Lost what's basic action, what's the main thing going on there, what's the summary. But as he says, but for the satisfaction of many that have desired it, I have procured it. And withal, a reason of that which stumbled many others, why the poem rhymes not. So what he's alluding to here is a piece that he had Milton write, which is called
Okay.
On the Verse,
Yeah.
where Milton explains himself, what's going on here.
So basically, the two problems are what's the basic action? People don't know, it's hard to follow. And why
Yeah,
the heck doesn't it rhyme?
yeah.
Yeah. And he sort of explains himself in that later edition.
Yes, if you know what if you're familiar with the terminology he's using, it's quite clear how to read the poem. He says to read it as English heroic verse without rhyme. But if you're not really vested in that tradition and know a lot about it, that's not necessarily so clear, at
Yeah.
least for a modern reader reading it. And this brings me to one of the things that I that I deal with in the beginning of the course, and that is blank verse. In my opinion, is one of the most misunderstood. Let's call it forms of literature, in the sense that there's this impression that's spread that it's a special kind of thing that you read almost like prose
Mhm.
and all of that, which could not be further from the truth. So in the beginning of the course, I'm going very carefully through the history of blank verse in England, where it comes from,
Mm.
why they abandoned rhyme in certain contexts for blank verse, and also look on some contemporary descriptions of how this actually works.
Yeah.
And
That's
that might surprise some people, I think.
it might surprise some people, but it might also open up a whole new world, a new way of like reading the poem or just being able to read it at all in the first place.
Yes, and this I've called the course Unlocking Its Expressiveness in Rhetoric and Language on 17th century terms, and that goes right to the heart of what we're talking about because Milton is so particular
Yeah.
about sound, about rhythm, um, and even his very emphatic use of enjambment, for example, where you let the line run over to the next line before you stop it. If that's all read like prose, that also starts to, in a sense, fall apart.
Yeah.
But that's just one example, because heroic verse was seen as the highest form of literature. It was second only to scripture.
Yeah.
So there were also very strict rules of how you could pronounce particular things. And we don't have sources from exactly that from Milton's time, but very shortly after. That there are, this is very worthy and highborn stuff. Could not be further removed from prose.
Yeah.
Very heavily metered and very carefully so.
Yeah.
So even if it doesn't rhyme, the determinations of the endings is very important.
Yeah. And the overall structure.
Yes, absolutely. And a good example of structure that I'm also using as a kind of entry point into working with the text itself, because um, since I'm not really a literature scholar, I'm a historical linguist, and that's what makes my approach particularly um, uh, uncommon is that I'm looking I'm looking at literature together with what's actually happening at the level of the language and the
Yeah.
history and yeah, and you could call it linguistic history that Milton is part of.
Yeah.
And Milton himself had quite strong views on language
Yeah.
that I will also talk a bit about, but I could just say that his language was very conservative even for a 17th century context.
Yeah.
Even yeah, so much so that there was a pioneering scholar called Ellis who listed him as a 16th century authority,
Yeah.
even though he didn't live a day in the 16th century, which is quite interesting.
That's funny.
Um,
Like it goes almost goes without saying that how a poem is written, its language, the way it's expressed, carries a lot of meaning as to sort of the content and narrative. As you said, Satan is very alluring and tempting and so on, but God speaks in very boring ways. These are sort of intentional, right? They manifest something of the content, but through the language. And what you're going to be presenting in the course is like, let's take this, a step deeper beyond the sort of surface level snippets here and there and look at what more Milton is expressing, right?
that's that's a very good way of putting it, actually, because Milton is quite well known, at least in some cases, for mirroring what he's saying, what he's trying to conjure up in his poem. He's very often reflecting that in his language, in his rhythm. There's a very famous example, of course, when Satan is being thrown down from heaven. It's all chaos and he's tumbling around. The language is also tumbling around.
Hmm.
He is toying very much with the sentence structure,
Yeah.
so that even that's just messing around and going back and forth. That's one of the more famous examples.
Yeah.
But one of the more, um I mean, being also very familiar with his rhymed poetry, which I studied quite intensely before focusing, well, before moving further with Paradise Lost. Is of course we talked about it, his very careful use of rhythms and stops, and particularly enjambments, but also the incredible variation that he's using in his lines, because in a typical line of so-called iambic pentameter, you divide that line in two parts, and you have a caesura, a kind of rest in the middle, and it could be on a couple of syllables usually,
Mhm.
and then that's pretty much it. If you think about this archetypal line, but what you
Yeah.
see when you read Paradise Lost is that there's so much more going on. There are so many more divisions. And when I say divisions, one thing that's also creating a barrier between Milton's text and us as readers today is that punctuation that Milton is using. And we can say using because even though the book is printed and there were printers that were typesetting things, what's interesting about Milton is that we have a lot of his poetic manuscripts. We
Hmm.
can actually see his own handwriting
Okay.
and his own practices, and that's very much carried through even in the printed, even
Hmm.
at least in the three
Yeah.
first editions. And in the past, punctuation was more rhetorical.
Right. Yeah.
It was its goal was rather to reflect natural pauses as you would speak them.
Yeah.
But in today, it's more about showing grammatical relationships.
Yeah. I get that sense in
And
Blake too. He also
yeah,
throws
you
punctuation wildly around.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're
Okay.
going to have a yeah, so we're going to have a look at that, and
A lot of other things. Man, this sounds exciting. It's like a almost like a restoration because you're restoring um, Milton's understanding and opening it up, making
at
it.
least to my abilities and my knowledge of the time.
Yeah.
So yeah. Um, I can also throw in that I'm planning a lecture that's only about Milton's use of rhyme in Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
And that might surprise
Um,
some people too.
well, yeah, there is a rhyme as well, right? And he uses it specifically.
More
Yeah.
that there's a very famous one, yeah, in book 9, line 781 and 782, where there is a rhyme for a very special reason. Yes, that's very
Yeah.
famous. But there's more.
Yeah. Okay. So really, this is a course that not only sort of does the maybe standard bit of looking at narrative and sort of I don't know, themes and psychological thing items and so on, but looking more on the text itself and the language and the
The,
expressions.
yes, the
Because,
text itself and the language. I think I could frame it a bit simpler. I want any so any person taking the course, I want them to be able to look at these texts, let's say in quotation marks, more like a person from the 17th century, to actually understand a bit about where Milton, what traditions does he come from,
mm,
and also what he's actually doing. And also, I want to also share what I find to be his rhetoric genius in what he's doing, but it's also not so easy to unlock everything that he is doing, and that's also the case um, in, for example, the very famous invocation, which opens the poem, which is in essence really just one sentence.
yeah.
And it's very important to keep track of that sentence in order to, in a sense, see what's really going on. And in a sense, the invocation, which I'm dedicating an entire lesson for, it's almost a microcosm of the entire poem in that sense. So I think the main takeaway that I want people to have from this course is to be able to really tackle what he's doing, these constructions, and learn to navigate them, but
Hmm.
not maybe importantly navigate them, appreciate them,
Yeah.
and see how intentional it actually is,
Yeah.
um, and not like this is an actual example from a Goodreads review of Paradise Lost that I read, and he had tried to read the poem, but Milton was such a terrible writer he couldn't understand anything, so he bought a simplified version
Yeah.
in just plain English. So
Yeah.
not poetry as such, but then, oh, okay, this is really good stuff, good narrative,
Yeah.
but a terrible, terrible writer.
Right.
And I think one of my main objectives in this course is to show that that is far from the case.
Mm.
But it's not so easy to unlock that and to go almost like go through it and just seeing it for what it is, because we have to almost train our brains to be a little bit 17th century like.
We have to be a little bit more Miltonic.
We have to be a bit more Miltonic. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that promises a lot. And if Milton's not a bad writer, if he is doing things with intention, then there is so much more in this poem than what is just out there in terms of the narrative and the themes, right?
Very much so.
So even the narrative and themes are fantastic and great and well known, but underneath that is the text itself, which promises to express even more beauty and wonder. So as any good poem does, right? It's not just the content, but also the form, and the form sort of reflects the content, and the content reflects the form. So the two sort of are in a dance where you get
Yes,
something more
yeah,
powerful when they are.
absolutely. And this is very, very much the case with
Yeah.
Milton and Paradise Lost.
All right. It sounds great, Kenneth. So we're looking to launch this in autumn. We're
Yeah.
planning a fairly substantial course. We won't say how many lectures, but it'll be a fairly substantial course. So it'll be our
Yeah.
flagship course for this year. And
Well, I don't know about that, but I'll do my best, certainly.
yeah, well, I think you will deliver something fantastic, and we're all people are really looking forward to it. Um, so final question: would you choose to reign in hell or serve in heaven?
Rain in Hell.
Reign in hell every time. All right, people, thank you so much for tuning in. Follow us on the channel, and we'll have more updates about the course as time goes by, and we'll come up with some more concrete details. So, thank you so much, Kenneth, for your time.
Yeah, thank you.